me in 60 minutes, 60 seconds.
Okay.
I think we're live.
You're live.
All right. Hello, folks. Kent Hovind here, and Nolan in some undisclosed location.
Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, Georgia. There we go. Okay, thank you, Nolan. We are going to be discussing what the Bible teaches, and then on the creation, and Nolan's going to give his refutation of that. So thank you, Nolan, for doing this. How many times have we met together for heated discussions like this? Is this number 3?
3, I believe.
Yeah.
This will be the 3rd one. And then hopefully there'll be a 4th one where I say what I believe and you do try to, refute. I would like, give you your shot to do that again.
I would be honored to do that.
Well,
okay.
Great.
All right.
Sounds good.
Well, let's see. Give a little background because there's a lot of new folks, and we're going live, I believe, on several different social media, which is I don't understand. But Steve, our techno guy, and Nick are in there working on that right now. For those I'll give a little background. For those that may not know, my name's Kent Hovind. I was a high school science and math teacher for 15 years. I moved to Pensacola, Florida in January of '89, and soon thereafter began a ministry called Creation Science Evangelism. I've been an ordained Baptist preacher since 1974. And I take the position that the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate, that God made the world in 6 days, and it is not millions of years old, and dinosaurs did not live millions of years ago, and the Bible can be trusted in every detail. So that's what I'm going to be presenting in just a few minutes. But Nolan, did you want to give an intro about yourself and what got you into this topic and why your interest?
Well, let's say I've always, I grew up going to church since I was a baby. That's why and I was in church forever. And, but after it took a while and I, finally, I would say, I was baptized in 3rd grade and then it changed my life for a long time. And then it took a while in learning other stuff and seeing things that were different. I even watched your videos, in 7th grade. That's when I was first introduced to that. And after some, with the internet, I think is what did it. I kept reading other things and reading and learning how the Bible is transmitted or this, that, and so-called contradictions or this, and then how, and after a while, it took me a long time. It was scary. I didn't go willingly, but I finally lost my faith around about 18 or 19, and I still fascinated by religion. I love it. I study Christianity, especially early Christianity, and I love science. I've always, and of course, I don't believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I think that's crazy. Not crazy, but I don't think it's. I think it's a short-sighted view and a very human-centric way of looking at stuff, and I don't see why an old Earth or evolution has any problem, reconciling with the Bible if that's what people want to believe. But anyway, I'm an agnostic, so I just don't know. But anyway, not much about me. Nobody special. Just somebody that reads a lot. I have a lot of time on my hands, and I hope we have fun with this.
Okay. Well, there you go. You asked me to present what I believe, and what I believe the Bible teaches. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
When I was 16, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior, started going to a little independent, temperamental, fundamental, right-wing, radical, chicken-eating Baptist church in Pekin, Illinois, and began to grow in the Lord and read my Bible. And I did not reach a point where my faith failed me, where I gave up. It actually got stronger. It's been nearly 50 years now. This February 9th, it'll be 50 years since I accepted Christ. And I've read the Bible, I don't know how many times, many, many times, scores of times, and I believe it to be literally true. Now, what's got me started in this, just as a 16-year-old, when I accepted Christ and started going to church, I was taking a lot of science classes in high school, sophomore year, took all the sciences I could. Ended up teaching science and mathematics for 15 years. My dad and older brother were both engineers. My mother and second brother were both public school teachers. And so the teaching and mathematics and engineering type stuff, logical thinking, I guess, kind of runs in our family. we would always have, very entertaining discussions on a variety of topics growing up around the house in East Peoria, Illinois. But when I began reading my Bible, you don't have to read very far, and you get to chapter 5 of Genesis, and it says Adam was 130 when his son was born. And I thought, oh, that's kind of old to have a baby. And then it says he lived 800 years after that. You can read all this in Genesis chapter 5 for yourself. But being from a family of engineers and mathematicians, I made a chart, a graph, which I have right here in front of me. I graphed out 100-year increments on the graph. Adam is 130 when his son is born. And I'm sure you've seen my graph many times, Nolan. And then it says he lived 800 years after that. That's what it says, Genesis chapter 5. Well, that means Adam lived to be 930. And then it says his son Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos, and he lived 807 years after that and had sons and daughters. Hebrew tradition, there's no scripture for this, but Hebrew tradition is that Adam and Eve had 56 children. Well, in 800 years, I think you could have a whole lot more than that, but 56 would be no problem. So if you say these people are producing children for 800 years per couple, like the Bible indicates, and they had, if you just take 50 kids per family, you take 50 times 50 times 50 times 50, you very quickly get into ginormous numbers. So there were very soon millions of people on the planet, and maybe even over 1 billion if you want to go 10 generations down to Noah, probably could be many more than that. But this is what the Bible says, and I believe that. I think there's certainly, we have the scripture teaches that plain and simple. We have the testimony of Jesus Christ, who certainly believed the Bible and quoted from Genesis 25 times. So if someone says they do not believe the Genesis story, which of course they're welcome to do, they have to admit or realize they're calling Jesus a liar, at least the recorded testimony of Jesus for us in the Bible. I think you'll also find there's a huge amount of what's called anecdotal evidence. Stories from countries all over the world talk about a time called the Golden Age. The Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Chinese, the people from ancient sections of India have legends of a golden age. And they'll say in those legends that man used to live to be nearly 1,000, and they didn't have to perform agriculture like they do today. Things just grew. Just rapid growth of all the plants. So it wasn't nearly as laborious as it is today to try to just survive on the planet. It was much easier. I'll call it Garden of Eden conditions, though technically Garden of Eden was only one spot as opposed to the whole planet. But I would say, why would there be all these legends of a golden age where people live to be 1,000 in some of the legends? Bible dates, the oldest one is Methuselah at 969. But quite a few, all of them, except for one, lived into the 900s. Enoch, who never died, lived to be 365 and was apparently translated straight to heaven. And another guy is just under 900 with 895. That would be Mahalalel. So, but still, 912 is the average age from the dates given just from those 10 patriarchs in the Bible. So I see no reason to doubt that. I see every reason to believe that. If you look at it from a scientific perspective, humans, you get a new set of teeth when you're, anywhere from 7 to 15, your teeth are falling out and coming in. And then finally, wisdom teeth, sometime between 16 and 25. A dentist could tell you the age range there. But there's been studies done that said, if a person could, and there's been actually examples of this where people are getting a third set of teeth. It appears that if you could live to be 150, you would get a new set of teeth come in. Just like you got your second set, you would get a third set. So one of the arguments against the great age, 900 years, is your teeth would wear out. And I understand that concern, but there may be something coded already to prevent that or to take care of that with new teeth every 100 years, let's say. I can't prove that. That is just anecdotal evidence. You can Google, do people ever get a third set of teeth? And there have been numerous cases where it has happened. People just in their 60s or 70s, a new set of teeth grow in. So there must be something in the gene code to do that. But regardless, the Bible clearly teaches people lived to be over 900 before the flood came. Now, I look at this as a science teacher and say, what about other animals? If man's living to be 900, maybe everything is living much longer. And it's a biological fact that reptiles and kangaroos, by the way, and a few other mammals never stop growing. So something must have been different in what I'll call the pre-flood time frame. There's about 1,700 years in here before the flood comes in the days of Noah. Something was very different. And quite a few animals have been found in the fossil record that are absolutely huge, like dinosaurs. Well, reptiles never stop growing. There may be a few exceptions to that, but I believe from what I've read, all reptiles never stop growing. If there are, their growth rate slows down, but they don't actually stop growing. There's something at the end of the cells, the bone cells that differentiate, that cause them to, they grow all their life. So if reptiles could live to be 900, that would be the dinosaurs. So I believe the creation perspective of history is man lived to be 900. All the animals were living much longer. 900 is 10 times longer than our average lifespan today, 10 or 12 times longer. So if we assume something similar, proportional true for other animals, it would be logical to see reptiles get to be 60 feet long, which is what we do see in the fossils. We find dinosaur bones with 100 feet long dinosaurs. So we find giant insects. Well, insects have to breathe through their skin, through spiracles. So they're very limited in how big they can get. I use the surface area to volume ratio on my seminar part 4. If you watch my creation seminar part 4 on drdino.com, or just Google Kent Hovind creation seminar part 4, I show a bunch of slides, and I could get them up here now, but it'd be laborious. A 1-inch cube, 1 by 1 by 1, a cube, has 1 cubic inch, but it has 6 sides, so it has 6 inches of skin, if it was an insect, to breathe, to supply the oxygen for 1 cubic inch of tissue, 6-to-1 ratio. What if we enlarge it to 2? If we go to 2 by 2 by 2, well, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. There are now 8 cubic inches. Each side having 4 square inches, 4 times the 6 sides is 24. Hold it. We just went from 6-to-1 ratio, skin to volume, down to 24 to 8, which is 3-to-1. By enlarging the size, we effectively made it harder for the creature to breathe, since he has to breathe through his skin. So any simple mathematics would tell you, if a creature is breathing through its skin, there's a certain size where it just simply cannot get enough oxygen to survive. We get dragonflies today that have 5-inch wingspan, but they find fossil dragonflies with 40 or 50-inch wingspan. So my perspective on this would be the fossil, if you call it a fossil record, there really is no fossil record. There are billions of fossils. But the fossils that have been recorded and studied and analyzed indicate insects were huge sometime in the past. Now, we would differ as far as when that was. I would say, yeah, that was just before the flood. And on this chart behind me, which I believe shows on screen or behind me here, the bottom timeline gives the big picture of history, and the top timeline is the details of what the Bible says is coming next about the future. This is from my series I did, my book and my chart on what on earth is about to happen, called WOE, W-O-E, for what on earth. But the Bible dates add up to the creation being about 6,000 years ago, and the flood being about 4,400 years ago. So something was different back here before the flood came. I believe this is the age of dinosaurs. This is the age of ginormous animals of all kinds. They find fossil kangaroos 10 feet tall. Well, kangaroos are one of those creatures that never stop growing. They find fossil wombat the size of a small car, like a Volkswagen. So I don't think anybody's going to argue that, yes, huge, huge fossils of many animals have been found. The question would be, we would differ on when was this and what caused it. I don't think you're going to have an explanation for 50-inch dragonflies other than to say there had to be greater air pressure to get the air into the body, or richer oxygen concentration. Today, the air we're breathing is about 21% oxygen, depending if you're in the woods or wherever you are, because the trees produce more of it, but roughly 21% average oxygen. The amber, petrified amber tree sap has been found with air bubbles in it. They analyze the air bubbles and find they're 32% oxygen. That's 50% more than we have today. We have 21. They used to have 32. At least that's what the air bubbles trapped in amber now indicate. My theory on that would be the flood in the days of Noah would have broken trees by the millions all over the world, and as the flood is going on, it's destroying everything, all the animals that weren't on the ark, trees being either buried to turn into coal or petrified wood. But broken trees the sap would ooze out, and that would turn into amber. Insects could get trapped in there very easily. They find snakes trapped in amber, whole snake. Birds, quite a few frogs, quite a few fish have been found in amber. You can just Google amber fossils, but that's a different story. Let's assume that this amber that we're finding is indeed from the flood in the days of Noah. Probably that's what formed most of the amber. And the air bubbles are 32% oxygen. So I would say that's probably trapping the pre-flood atmosphere. And now we're digging them up and analyzing, say something was different back here. I think before the flood, they not only had greater air pressure, they had greater oxygen concentration. And those are two key factors that allowed them to live much longer. Plus, I think the Bible clearly teaches in Genesis chapter 1, verse 6 and 7, that there was water above the firmament. Now, the firmament, it tells us down in verse 20 of Genesis chapter 1, the firmament is where the birds fly. So that would be the atmosphere. So there used to be water above the atmosphere. I take the strong position that was probably a canopy of ice. The Jews have always taught it was 2 or 3 fingers thick. So let's just take the assumption that the earth, 10 miles above the earth, had a canopy, a crystalline canopy like a greenhouse, a couple of fingers thick, a couple inches thick of solid ice. Outer space is 450 some degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, 3 degrees Kelvin, minus 170 centigrade, minus 455, I think, Fahrenheit. Okay, doesn't matter. The fact is, outer space is real cold. So if this canopy of super cold ice could be suspended by air pressure, squeezing our current atmosphere, of which is, say, 50 miles of air stretched out, if you could squeeze it down to 10 miles, encapsulated in a sphere of ice, it could be held up like an inflatable building. You know, a few inches of ice wouldn't weigh much. It would take 1.2 atmospheres, I think, is what it would, mathematics works out to be, instead of 1 atmosphere. Atmospheric pressure, 14.7 pounds at sea level per square inch. So increasing air pressure just 10 or 15 or 20% would float a canopy above the atmosphere. The other factor that might have been involved, again, this is all gone, so whatever happened, the canopy's now gone. I can't prove this. This is my theory. But a canopy of ice would maintain its frozen position, being in contact with outer space. Just like an Eskimo can walk into his ice igloo and build a fire. He can't melt the roof because outside it's so cold, it conducts the heat away. Any excess heat is conducted away through the roof into the bitter cold outside, just like I think the canopy would be preserved by suspended by the air pressure or the magnetic field. Extremely cold ice down below 300 below 0 Fahrenheit takes on different character traits. The crystals realign, just like when you squeeze ice and squeeze the air bubbles out, it becomes firn, F-I-R-N, and it behaves like plastic. It flows. Glaciers will actually slowly flow like silly putty down a mountain because it's glacial firn. It's not just sliding like a landslide or an avalanche, it's actually creeping along. Well, at extremely low temperatures, the ice would become magnetic. It would also become fiber optic. There's been lots of research done on this. Different creationists have published plenty of information. But to summarize my position, the Bible clearly teaches, I think, that there was a canopy of ice above the atmosphere, and that explains that would block out UV light. That increased air pressure, increased oxygen, perfect diet, perfect soil to grow things in. All of that, of course, all of that was destroyed at that flood. The soil is now destroyed, rearranged. The atmosphere is now 60 miles thick instead of 10, so we only have less air pressure. Now we're getting all the radiation in from the sun, the UV light, ultraviolet, X-rays, etc. After the flood, you see a rapid drop in lifespans. If you go to Genesis chapter 10 and 11, the lifespans drop off quickly to 400 for a few generations, and then down to 200, and then down to 100. And today, not many people make it to 100. So something was different, and it changed because, I think, because of that flood. The things that would have changed by that flood would be the soil now being all disrupted, and the good topsoil now mixed in with all kinds of other things that are less fertile. I think you'd have more radiation from the sun. You'd start to get a declining genetic code. Today, the average person has 3,500 defective genes in their gene code. So if you marry close to your bloodline, like if you married your first cousin or aunt or niece or sister, there's a very high probability you would produce deformed children, because there's a great chance that out of the thousands of genes that we have, those 3,500 would line up and there'd be something wrong with the child. Hexadecimalism, 6 fingers, 6 toes. Albinoism is sometimes from that. The different things can happen to cause deformities in children. That would not be the case with the original creation. They had a pure gene code. And by the time you get to Abraham, who's way down here, 2,000 years after the creation, God told, I'm sorry, not even Abraham married his half-sister. You go from Abraham, a few hundred years later, you get to Moses on my chart here. Abraham, you go to Moses about 1400 BC, and God gave his laws to Moses. He said, Moses, you can't marry cousins anymore. Don't marry close kin. But really, for the first 25 years of human history, it was allowed. There was no mention of it being wrong until Moses, way up here. And in many cultures today, they still marry close kin. There are tribes all over the planet that it's required that you marry in the tribe. Look up the ostrich people. They're required to marry in the tribe, and they only have 2 toes on their feet. They're deformed, and their teeth fall out in the middle of the night just sleeping. So they have some serious genetic problems from marrying close kin. So the creation view would be God made everything in 6 days. And it was perfect, absolutely perfect. Man sinned, introduced sin and disobedience into the world, and man brought death into the world. Nothing would have died had Adam not sinned. Of course, the evolution theory says death is what brought man into the world, which is exact opposite of what the Bible says. That flood explains all the geology that we see. The Grand Canyon probably formed as a result of the flood. The whole Central California Valley was probably a giant lake for maybe 50 or 100 years after the flood, when it got too deep, went over the top and washed out the San Francisco Bay. If you closed up the San Francisco Bay, the big lake would fill in from Redding clear down to Bakersfield, California. It's quite obviously a drained lake. Same thing with El Paso, Texas. It's called El Paso because it's the pass through the mountains. Close up that gap between the mountains where El Paso is, and a big lake would form behind it. The Rio Grande would be, that part of it would be a giant lake into New Mexico. So I think that the flood is the only explanation for the fossils that we find. A guy called me today from Poland talking about the fossils. And I said, well, question, how many animals are going to die today? He said, millions. I said, how many are going to be fossilized? He said, probably none. I said, well, you can Google the Karoo Formation, Karoo, where they find estimated 800 million vertebrate fossils in one big, huge graveyard. Vertebrate meaning they have a backbone. So if you have 800 million fossils in one pile, I think that's indication A, they were buried rapidly. Today, if an animal dies, the scavengers haul it all over the woods. The buzzards, the coyotes, the animals, the ants, they drag it off. You're hardly going to find 2 bones together. You're not going to find a whole skeleton. The only way you can explain completely articulated skeletons, all the bones connected, buried and turned to stone, I think the only logical explanation is they were rapidly buried before any scavengers had time to get to them, and that would be Noah's flood. Clams in the closed position indicate they had to be buried alive, because when you go walk along the beach, you find millions of seashells, but you never find a matched pair. If they're dead, they open and something eats them right away. The seagulls, the fish, crabs, something eats them and they're gone. They fall apart. So petrified clams in the closed position, and we have hundreds in our museum in Lenox, Alabama, they're an indication of extremely rapid burial. Probably buried alive in mud, couldn't even open up. They woke up dead and petrified in the closed position. Petrification can take place very rapidly under the right conditions, heat, pressure, minerals, etc. So My position is that the Bible teaches there was a creation 4,400 years ago. There was a flood in the days of Noah, which explains all the fossils, explains all the geology, all the strata of the earth, all the layers formed in that flood, not different ages, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic. My position is the geologic column is a joke. It's a hoax. It doesn't exist. There is no geologic column. It doesn't exist. And then after the flood, God called one man named Abraham, said, I got a special job for you. You and your children are going to carry, you're going to bring the world my word, the Bible. You're going to bring the world the Messiah, and you're going to be a model nation. If you're good, I'm going to bless you. If you're bad, I'm going to curse you. I'm going to show the rest of the world through you guys, the Jews, the descendants of Abraham, how I want things done. And so I believe the Bible is exactly literally true. Man is a sinful state, and we've fallen from God, and we need to be redeemed. And Jesus Christ came down about 2,000 years ago, died on the cross to pay for our sins. And anyone that will receive him can become a child of God, like I am, almost 50 years now. All right, that was 28 minutes. Sorry about that, Nolan, but your turn. Tell me what you don't believe about that.
That's no problem, because I mean, from this point, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. And, well, for starters, I just want to say something about teeth wearing out. Did you know a 5-year-old, they can do an x-ray of their mouth and find out they see the other teeth, all the other teeth, including the wisdom teeth. They're already in your mouth. There are no third set of teeth. If anybody's had a third set of teeth, it's because of a mutation that was shouldn't have happened. Some people have 2 sets when they're born, but no, there's no third set at 150. They've done x-rays on people's mouths. That dentist would have known this. But beside that, okay, we need to get down to this. First, I need to ask these questions, okay?
Okay.
What would constitute a contradiction in the Bible to you? What constitutes one? What would you say would constitute one?
Well, whether there are contradictions in the Bible, I would say doesn't matter. You asked me what I believe. I told you that's what I believe. Now, if you don't want to believe it, that's your choice. But I think the contradiction, there have been, I would point out that the Bible is the anvil that's worn out many hammers over the centuries. There have been about 500 supposed contradictions pointed out. All of them have been successfully answered, I believe. But I would want you to keep in mind, Aristotle said, 400 BC, if there's an argument about a book, the book cannot get up and talk. It can't defend itself. So the benefit of the doubt goes to the document. The critic must prove his point. So if you think you have a contradiction, if that's where you want this discussion to go, tell me what it is, and I'll either already have the answer or I'll find it.
I'm trying to ask quick questions right now.
Okay.
Just a quick question. What would constitute one? What would you if something says one thing and then another one says something different, or if it says a certain number and another one says a different number? What would constitute a contradiction to you?
Well, obviously, let's suppose one observer says a certain number and another observer says a different number. That may or may not be a contradiction. It might be that I only saw 4 people there and somebody from a different angle saw 7 people there. So there may be an answer to it. I don't know. That's an apparent contradiction.
Also, that whole Aristotle's dictum thing, by that logic, Lord of the Rings could be considered true, because it's a document and you have to give it the benefit of the doubt, and there's no contradictions in Lord of the Rings, so you might as well believe in Middle Earth by that logic. But anyways, okay, what if something wasn't scientifically accurate in the Bible? Okay, as if it were impossible, or what would your answer be to that? Would you just say it was miraculous, or would you try to find an answer for it to say it could be scientifically accurate?
Okay.
If something,
I guess I'd want a specific rather than a generic statement.
Of course,
like that.
I'm going to get into specifics.
Okay. Is it scientifically accurate to say a snake can talk, or a man can walk on water, or the dead can come back to life? By all of our modern science and observations, no, we never observed that. Does that mean it can't happen? Well, if you're talking about the creator of the universe doing this, if he can make the snake to begin with, he can certainly make it talk. If he can make the person come alive, he can also make a dead person come alive. So I don't think that would prove a contradiction or anything scientifically inaccurate. Maybe unexplainable would be a better word than inaccurate.
Okay. How about this? If the world were old, would that make the Bible wrong? 4.6 billion years old.
4.6 billion years old.
Would that or 4.5? Would that make the Bible wrong?
That would certainly contradict what I think the Bible clearly teaches. More important than Earth being old, though, would be the Bible clearly teaches that nothing died till Adam sinned. So if you want your 4.6 billion year old Earth to have animals or plants dying, or not plants necessarily, but animals dying before man even comes along, that would clearly contradict the Bible. If there was death before sin, yes, the Bible would be wrong, or somebody would be wrong.
Okay. What, if anything, would change your mind?
I'm very open-minded. I have reasonably high IQ. I've got quite a bit of education. I've read prolifically on these topics. I'm willing to listen to anything.
But what, if anything, would change your mind? Can you give me an example of something that would change your mind?
Kind of an unfair question. If I told you pigs could fly, what would change your mind to make you believe they could fly? Well, you'd want to see one fly.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to see one fly. I guess if you could demonstrate something scientifically or mathematically incorrect in the Bible, I would certainly, if I couldn't find an answer, I'd certainly come into question and doubt. Say, well, maybe there's something here. Sure.
About the same thing I would say about what I believe. Okay. Now, let's go into this whole thing about the reason that there are certain things called golden ages, or what people wrote about. There's a very simple reason for that. People used to deify their ancestors. There's still ancestor worship today in certain things. And the reason that, I mean, the Sumerians said that the kings lived till 28,000 years, and but it's a deification of ancestors. And but that's the reason for that. And reptiles never stop growing, but they grow so small of a number, like percentage-wise, after they're an adult, that it's almost negligible. It's not like they just grow 30 more feet if they could just live, 20, 50 more years. But that's neither here nor there. What I wanted to say, okay, for starters, you believe that you said the Bible says that animals bring forth after their kind?
Yes, sir.
Can you show me what verse says that?
Well, Genesis chapter 1, the first chapter, says it 10 times.
What name the verse?
Genesis, got it right in front of me here. Genesis chapter 1. Let's see. The first one, I think, is in verse 20. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind. And every winged fowl after his kind, or 10 times, from verse 21 on, in these 10 verses, 10 times.
We read that carefully. It said, which the waters bring forth abundantly after their kind.
Okay.
It says over and over, let the earth bring forth living creature after his kind. Okay?
This is the initial creation. When God first made them, he made the waters bring forth the fish after their kind. He made the ground bring forth the animals after its kind. Since then, that's all we've ever seen is animals producing after their kind.
But but the Bible never says that it says that animals bring forth after their kind. It never says it specifically. It says that the earth because you wouldn't say today the earth brings forth animals. That would, or the water does. But okay, let's go to Leviticus, I believe. Let me get it's talking about ravens in this Leviticus chapter. I believe it's Leviticus 11, chapter 11, and let me see here. It says,
verse 15. Every raven after his kind.
Yes, every raven and every vulture and kite after his kind.
Right.
Now, if it says that a raven after his kind can't really be a family or anything higher than that, because a raven is a corvus, is the genus, and then a species of it. So if a raven is after its kind, it would be every species of raven. because they're all in the genus Corvus, and so are other animals, not just the ravens, other birds. And vulture, another animal just like that, and a kite. Hawk after his kind. It doesn't say bird anymore. This is more specific.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is, if you say that kind means past family or even sometimes order, because I've heard you say lizard or something, or maybe it's still a bird, which a bird's a class of animals. Of course, nothing's going to give birth to an animal that's not a bird. Would always have a bird or a.
Right.
What?
I'm glad
Of
you
course,
agree.
everybody believes that. Every person in evolution believes that. No, every animal has its own the species. There's no other way around that. But every animal has has babies or offspring of the same species. But after time, speciation happens. You believe that because you believe that zebras and horses come from the same kind, right? So
well, you're confusing the terms here. Back in, I don't know the date, 1600s, Carolus Linnaeus, maybe it was even, he developed our current classification system, kingdom, order, family. King Philip came over for Girl Scouts.
Kingdom, Brown, class, order, family, genus,
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Right. Been years since I taught that. Okay. So he developed that system to try to put our modern distinction on, is this the same kingdom as this kingdom? This is all in the last few hundred years. We've tried to classify animals. Man likes to classify things, keep the screwdrivers in one drawer and the hammers in another drawer. That's just people have done that for decades, for centuries, trying to organize things in our mind. Well, 6,000 years before that, God said they'll bring forth after their kind.
But it doesn't say that.
Okay.
It says let the earth.
God created the animals. I'll rephrase it.
Yes,
God
he created the animals after their kind.
He created the animals.
And it also says raven after kind.
Right. So is a raven and a hawk the same kind? No. They might be they might be both in the same class, aves, or is that an order? I forget.
Yeah, it's a class.
Okay. So they're both in the same class called aves, but they're obviously a different kind of animal. A hawk and a raven are different.
Heard from upgrade to Mac OS High Sierra.
That's my thing. It's all good. Anyway, okay. So what I wanted to say is about that is that the whole thing. But you believe that horses and zebras have common ancestors, right?
I believe a horse and a zebra to a 5-year-old would be the same kind of animal as opposed to a horse and a pine tree.
Do they have a common ancestor?
Probably. I don't know. I don't know if I could prove that.
Okay. Would you say a wolf and an African wild dog, or an African painted wild dog has would be a common ancestor?
Well, I don't think I could prove that either. That would be reasonable. More reasonable than saying an African painted dog and a pine tree have a common ancestor, which is what you believe.
Tigers and lions.
Tigers and lions can crossbreed. They get a liger or a tigon, depending which one's the male.
Infertile, though.
Yeah, usually infertile. I think like horses and asses breed and get a donkey, and they are 99.99% infertile. But there have been a few fertile ones.
The ones that are fertile are only fertile because they breed with another donkey, and what is born is a donkey. It's not a mule.
Sure.
They're not fertile with a mule. You get what I'm saying? It has to go back to the.
I understand. I agree.
But what I'm saying is,
they're the same kind of animal. They have hooves. They have 4 legs.
Like dogs. That you'll say dogs create dogs, or okay. But would you say horses bring forth zebras?
No, I would say the common ancestor. Would I say Chihuahuas bring forth Great Danes? No.
Of course not.
But some kind of dog-like ancestor had the gene code that could be selected for smallness or selected for bigness by whoever's doing the selecting.
Well, there's a lot of adaptation there, too. It took a long time to do that.
Well, I think you could take generic dogs and selectively breed down to Chihuahuas in 100 years. I've had people
somebody tell you that, but does that mean that it's
200 years?
Okay, but so what I'm saying is, if at some point you believe that animals speciated to horses to zebras to donkeys to all that, at some point something had to bring forth not It was the same species, and then it had to become a different species completely.
Well, you're switching words from kind to species, which is what they always do in these debates and discussions.
Because kind, I just showed you that kind can mean a species as well. I've showed you that kind can mean kinds of birds, kind of raven, kind of hawk. But
well, I don't know what the original kinds were. Let's pick a number and say there were 4 original kinds of single hoof-like animals that we classify. The horse, the zebra may have had a common ancestor. They may not have. I think they most likely did. But that is not evidence that the horse and the pine tree have a common ancestor, which is what you believe.
But if it's evidence of that, if you go back further from that, you could say that if that had a common ancestor, and then you go further and say, could this two have a common ancestor?
This is why it's a religion. This is why it's something you believe. It's not science.
But we're not going to talk. We're not speaking on it. I just wanted to say that kind can be. It's too flexible of a thing. Anyway,
so is species.
If you think so, but I believe species just means an animal that
is a dog and a wolf a different species?
No, they're not.
Okay.
They're not. Look it up. Canis lupus and Canis lupus domesticus. It's just a subspecies.
Is a horse and a zebra a different species?
Absolutely.
Can they interbreed?
No.
You sure?
Nope. They can't interbreed. They can have.
Ever heard of a zorse?
Yeah, a zorse, but that's not interbreeding. They can't have fertile offspring. That's what a species.
I didn't say fertile. They produce an offspring.
But that's what species is, having fertile offspring. That's how you know. But anyway, how about Genesis 9:2? It says, "And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered." Do you believe that?
Yeah, I can read it. I got it right in front of me.
Do you believe it?
I believe after the flood, before the flood, all of the animals were friendly. They had no reason to fear man because everybody was vegetarian. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 and 30 indicate that all the animals and all the people were, at least they were supposed to, eat plants. They were vegetarian, lived on a vegetarian diet. After the flood, God's telling Noah now, after the flood, hey, the animals are going to be afraid of you. And you can go ahead and eat them in the next verse.
It says all of them, though.
I think
God. You believe that great white sharks fear man?
I think all animals. Well, this is. Well, let's read it carefully.
It said upon all that moveth upon the earth, upon all the fishes of the sea.
Do you think? Do you think great whites have a fear of man?
Nope.
Not at all.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't believe that worms have a fear of man. I think that certain animals. It says all that moveth too, but I don't believe blue whales have a fear of man. There's actually a lot of animals we know don't have fear of man,
and that's enough for you.
Oh, I'm just saying that's not. I would say that's not a true statement. Is what I'm saying.
Okay, and that's enough for you to doubt the whole Bible because of that.
But also, do you believe that just two people can have enough genetic differences between them to have a whole population be born from them?
You believe the whole population came from a rock?
No, that we're not talking about that right now.
Well, that's what evolution teaches.
No, but that isn't what we're talking about.
Okay.
The question.
Yes, I believe every human on the planet today, all the dark-skinned, light-skinned, red-skinned people with blonde hair, brown hair,
all the genetic differences.
All of that came from Adam and Eve. I believe that. Just like I believe all the Chihuahuas and the Great Danes and the Dobermans could all be bred back could all have come from the gene code of 2 original dogs. I believe that. And
you do know dogs reproduce 40 times faster, or have a generation rate 40 times faster. That's right. And that was done. That's reasonable, yeah. And also that was done with artificial selection. With natural selection, things stay a little slower to
correct.
And so
let's chase that rabbit for a minute. With artificial selection, with man doing the selecting, they have now selected dogs to get down to the slice of the gene code of a dog that's pretty small, the Chihuahua. Do you think they will ever be able to get a dog as small as a flea?
This is an absurd question. It's a mammal. Mammals won't be that size.
Okay, how about the size of a pygmy mouse? That's a mammal. There are animals as big as a
It's
pygmy
not.
mouse. It's
Yes,
called a pygmy mouse.
yes, and there's things that classify dogs as dog. What you're saying is, are there size limitations? Of course there are. Are there limitations on God?
Oh, don't change the subject.
No, that's what we're talking about, though.
No,
We're talking
are there limitations in the genetic code that say you can get a dog
There's
down to a Chihuahua?
Of every generation there will be limitations, but over time, I believe that a little difference here goes a long way. If you chip at something every day, after a while, you can take down a tree if you only hack it once.
I understand. So let me see if follow this. Stay on this thought now. So are you saying it is possible to get a dog as small as a pygmy mouse?
I don't know.
Okay. Is it possible to get a dog as big as an elephant, which is a mammal?
No.
Why not? Why not? There are animals as big as an elephant.
The way their gait is and their feet, they wouldn't be able to hold it. Their bones would break. Just like we can't be 16 feet tall, even though you believe there were giants of that size. No, our knees and all that stuff would give out and break because the way bipedalism works, we wouldn't be able to walk or run if we were a certain size. That's why people that are 8 feet tall, have you ever noticed that they need braces and stuff, and they can't run very well? Even the ones in basketball, like Yao Ming, he was 7'5", and guess what? He had to retire at like age 28 because of broken feet, broken this. People that get a certain height, because once you increase height, you have to increase body mass so much more. But anyway.
Well, let's stay on that thought now.
No,
so you're saying there are limits?
We're supposed to be talking about this next time.
So we bring forth after their kind. I said they bring forth after their kind, and that's what the Bible says.
I'm off of that. I want to know if God has limitations.
If God has limitations, God could probably put limitations on himself, but my definition of God would be one that can do as he pleases. He's God. He owns the place. So if he chooses to put a limitation on himself, I suppose he could. I don't know. I think he has a couple times. He limited himself when he became a man and allowed them to crucify him. He limited himself in time, space, matter. He chose to be in one place, where before that he's in all places at all times. He's not limited by time, space, or matter, but he chose to visit our little world where we are all limited by time, space, and matter. I can't be two places at a time, and I can't be two times at the same place.
You believe God cannot lie?
God says he cannot lie.
But can liars say I cannot lie?
Oh, a liar could say that, sure.
Okay, so he could be lying.
Oh, it could be, yeah, could be.
Okay. And also, it's weird that humans can do something God can't in that case, right?
Something evil? We do lots of evil things that God chooses not to do.
God has done evil things, then by the logic of us, I think killing the firstborn of every person in Egypt would be considered evil. Some of those people had nothing to do with what the Pharaoh was doing in that story.
Hold it. Don't hit and run now. We went into Germany. Let's say take Japan. We went in and dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
Yes, morally repugnant.
But look how many lives it saved.
How do you know it saved lives?
Well, all the generals did the math on this and said, look, if we attack Japan,
yes,
we're going to lose 1 million men.
Japan had already been. Japan was sending out feelers for, guess what? A truce. All they wanted to do, or peace talk, but they wanted to keep their emperor. We kept going, unconditional surrender. But in the end, we let them keep the emperor anyways. And if you're going to drop atomic bombs, why not on military targets? We actually killed American citizens in those cities. Those cities weren't even military targets. You think that's okay to indiscriminately murder 90-something thousand, 100,000 people?
You're missing the point entirely. Was God justified to say, Pharaoh, I've asked you 9 times now, let my people go. God said, Pharaoh, I've told you 9 times, I've performed 9 miracles.
He hardened his heart. That's why he didn't let them go, though.
So God is perfectly justified to say, that's it, I'm killing the firstborn of all the Egyptians.
So if God hardens his heart, so he doesn't let him go. He even said he would do that. He said, he's going to let you go, but I'm going to harden his heart so he won't. Not, I'm going to do something where he could have went a different way. He said, I will harden his heart.
Well, you can read the whole story. There are several times where it says Pharaoh hardened his heart.
Yes, you're right. But other times God did. So God wouldn't have done that.
Or maybe there's an explanation that you're not willing to listen to. Maybe I could say the sun shines on a stick of butter and softens it, but the same sun shines on a stick of clay and hardens it.
You
It's
do
the
know
reaction.
that
It's the
harden.
same sun.
You know, harden in this case is not like hard, like something physical. This is a hardening of this
Attitude.
is yes. That's not the same thing. Saying that butter gets frozen, or butter or something gets frozen, or clay can harden in the sun. That's not the same thing. Are you saying
Right.
that God, you're telling me when God says will harden his heart, that if Pharaoh had a soft heart, God couldn't have hardened it? Is that what you're saying?
He certainly could have. People react differently when things happen. Like when I went to prison, I decided, okay, Lord, I don't like this, but you're God. When bad things happened to Job, a lot of bad things happened to Job, his reaction was, God, if you kill me, I'm going to serve you. If bad things happened to Nolan, have you hardened your heart, Nolan, since third grade when you said you accepted the Lord? And then
harden my heart? I've hardened my heart for certain things, but I actually learned to live with the bad. I understand that stuff like that.
Okay.
But let's say this. Okay, 1 John chapter 3, verses 6 through 12.
Okay.
Actually 6 through 11. And I'll read them to you just to make sure everybody hears it. And I'm reading from the King James.
Good.
Okay. Whosoever abideth in him sinneth not. Whosoever sinneth hath not seen him, neither known him. Little children, let no man deceive you. He that doeth righteousness is righteous, even as he is righteous. He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinneth from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, for he is born of God. In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever doeth not righteousness is not of God, neither he that loveth not his brother. Okay? Now, it says right there, who is born of God does not commit sin. He cannot sin, but he is born of God. And it says the children of God. He's not talking about Jesus here. He's talking about everybody that you become. God becomes your father once you. So, can people that are born of God sin? It says right here they can't.
There is a very long explanation to this. On the 1700s, I'm going to give it to you. A guy named Matthew Henry did a commentary in the 1700s. Okay, just Google Matthew Henry commentary.
So you don't know the answer off the top of your head.
I did not say that. I said I'm going to give you an answer. But if you want a very long answer, read the Matthew Henry comment. I'm about to give you one.
So I can read the Bible just like you say you can read it. It says God did this in 6 days. I can read right here. It says he cannot sin, that he does not commit sin.
Are you ready for an answer?
Go ahead.
There are two Kent Hovins. There is one born to my mom and dad, January 15th, 1953.
Is this biblical?
This is absolutely correct. I was born as a physical birth to my mom and dad, like probably you were also, and probably everybody listening.
Is that biblical?
Yes. Because in February 9th, 1969, at age 16, I was born again. And he gave me a brand new spirit inside. There are two, the old nature, the sinful nature. The Bible talks a lot about the old man and the new man. The old Kent Hovind loves to sin. The new Kent Hovind is not even capable of sinning, but they live in the same body. And I have to sometimes, I try to follow the new one, but sometimes I slip up and follow the old one. So the new one cannot sin. The new Kent Hovind is not even capable of sinning, just like 1 John says. It says, that which is born of God cannot sin.
But aren't you born of God?
Well, but not the body. This body is almost 66 years old. It was born to my parents, and it is certainly capable of sin.
But so you're born of God. But when he says born again, it's the same person.
But look what it says. It says very clearly in 1 John 3, that which is born of God. What was born of God? Not this body, not the old Kent Hovind. The new Kent Hovind is the one that was born of God, and it hasn't sinned ever since.
No, the old Kent Hovind had to be born of God. How could a new Kent Hovind that didn't exist, that one existed afterward, you said? So the old one had to be born of God. And then you say that you became new.
Well, Romans chapter 7 and 8 talk about that. Paul said, "Wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of this death? That which I would do, I don't do. The things that I don't want to do, I do." This is the conflict every
So
Christian.
you're saying that somebody else says you can sin. But here it says that you.
That's the conflict, internal conflict that every Christian faces. The flesh wants to sin, the spirit wants to not sin, and they're stuck in the same body. So there's a battle. I'm anxious to get out of that battle, but so far.
If you believe that you're of the devil, if you commit sin, so everybody is of the devil.
Well, I think our flesh, our sinful nature, came from the devil. Well, it says, no, it says, and read it carefully, that which is born of God cannot sin.
Right.
Well, what exactly? Jesus told in John chapter 3, he told Nicodemus, you have to be born again. He's talking to an older fellow, one of the rabbis probably in Israel. He said, you have to be born again. And he didn't understand that. When you receive Christ, John 1:12, that's how you get born again, by receiving him. So there are two Kent Hovinds living in this same body, and they fight all the time. But the new one is not even capable of sinning.
But it says, whosoever sinneth hath not seen him, neither known him. So, okay, how about this one then? This is some good. John 14:12. And we could go from there, what Jesus says. He says, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, and that the Father may be glorified in the Son. And if ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. Can you ask anything in Jesus' name and he do it?
I could ask anything of my dad, my earthly dad, when I was growing up, and he would give me one of three answers. Yes, no, or later. Dad, can I have an ice cream? No, not till after supper. Yes, you can have it, but not till after supper. Okay, so he would put a restriction on that. I think the Heavenly Father knows when we ask things from him, he knows how to answer yes or no, that would not be good for you. If God give me $10 million, he would say, son, that would
didn't say no. It said that he will do it if you ask in his name. Not, I will say no. And it also says that people will do greater works that believe on him. Do you believe anyone's done greater works than Jesus?
Jesus only traveled around his own country and a couple of neighboring countries. Man, I've been to 37 countries. I've been all over the world. Jesus never got to Australia, Japan.
That's greater works than Jesus?
I don't know, but I've probably preached to more people than he preached to during his lifetime.
Of course so. You know that if you take all of what it says Jesus said in the Gospels, it's only about 2 hours. So if he were preaching for 3 years, that's a small amount of stuff that he said.
I think the 3 years is a myth, but that's another story. Probably
there's three Passovers in John.
Yeah, there's 2 Passovers, but
3.
Okay.
The third one is when he dies.
Well, you could get 3 Passovers in 1 year and 2 days.
Well, in 2 years, actually.
You could get it in 1 year, and 3 Passovers.
2 years.
But there are those who it doesn't matter. There are people who argue about, was his ministry 3 years? I think the Catholics made that up.
I think it's
doesn't matter. But
all right, how about this? When did Jesus clear the temple?
I don't know. I haven't studied. Is that a supposed contradiction now you're going to?
I'm just asking you the question. When did Jesus clear the temple, the money changers, and all that?
It appears that he did it twice. When he first came and began his ministry, and then toward the end of his ministry, he did it again. I think there are twice he cleared the temple.
You don't think it's odd that John doesn't mention it at the end and the other ones don't mention it at the beginning?
If God is authoring this book through different people, if the Holy Spirit is guiding them, like 1 Timothy 3 says, the word is inspired. God inspired the men to write. God probably saw, Luke already said that, so John, you don't need to say that.
But wait. There's some things that are in there 3 times.
Oh, I know. In the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word is established. Like Jesus saying, if you offend these little children, Matthew chapter 18, Mark chapter 9, you'd be better with a millstone hanged about your neck. So if you're teaching somebody evolution and you're offending a child that believes in him, you're in trouble when you stand before God. That's mentioned 3 times.
So since all word is inspired by God is only mentioned 1 time, there's not 3 witnesses or 2 to that.
Well, that's true. One's plenty for me, but if he really wants to emphasize something, I suppose he does 3, and sometimes even 4.
That's something I think needs to be emphasized more than,
Yeah,
you know.
interesting. I'll check on that. That's a good point.
Okay. But you think he cleared the temple in Jerusalem and then
Twice.
did it twice?
It's 17 hours.
I mean, you don't think that's kind of weird that he could do that in Jerusalem? That's what made them decide to crucify, or that he needed to die. Remember? That's in the stories of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, right? Isn't that what they decided, that he had to be done away with? That's when they decided that they were conspiring. It says that.
Well, I think they decided to kill him when he said when he said, "Are you older than Abraham?" They said, "Are you older than?" He said,
That's in John.
Yeah, before Abraham was, I am. By using those 2 words, I am, they knew he's referring back to Moses when God said, "You tell Pharaoh, I am sent you." Jesus was claiming to be God, so they wanted to crucify him for blasphemy.
Why, if he's claiming to be God, which would be a very, very huge claim, right?
Oh yeah.
Why wouldn't any of the other gospels say it once? That seems to be one of the more important things that you would mention. And you know, the Gospel of John was written after all the other ones, right?
Well, how about in the book of Acts, where it says God purchased the church with his own blood?
There's a textual variant on that.
Well, Acts 20:28. You got a King James there.
Yes, it does say it. It does say it in the King James.
That was the agreement. How about John chapter 1, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God."
But why wouldn't Matthew, Mark, or Luke once say any of these stories about Jesus being God? Jesus, you know, I mean, you would think that would be one of the most important things to be said. Right?
I don't know that they don't. I can't think of a verse right now. I have to look at that. Do they?
They don't.
Well, do they imply the deity of Christ? I think recording the miracles of him walking on water.
But he said people would do greater miracles after him. Greater. And he also said that you could do the things he did. Can people do the things Jesus did?
I can't raise the dead.
But he said that the works that I do, shall he do also, that believeth on me, and greater works than me. So,
well, interesting. I've never been asked that question. I have to research on that.
Okay. Of course, and I'll let you research it. And the next time we talk, I hope that I'll give you time for an answer. I don't want to give a gotcha question or a gotcha.
Okay. Well, good, thank you. You're unusual in that regard. Ray Comfort just published a video called "Crazy Bible," where he interviews atheists. Yeah, well, he interviews atheists, and he says, "Look, the Bible has some crazy stories: talking snakes, talking donkeys, walking on water. Why would God do that?" And his answer was classic. Ray's a good friend of mine. I compliment him for doing that video. I would encourage people to go to livingwaters.com and watch that video, Crazy Bible.
You do know that I could get a video camera and film enough Christians and get some stupid or dumb answers from them as well, right?
Oh, atheists do that.
If you edited it well enough.
They do that to me all the time. Welcome to my world.
Hey, I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. How about this? Mark 15:25 says, "And it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him." John 19:14-16 says, "About the 6th hour." Okay?
Sure.
3rd and 6th aren't the same, would you say?
Well, it depends which clock you're using, the Roman clock or the Hebrew clock.
So they're using different clocks, is what you're saying.
Well, the Romans and Hebrews use different calendars. They still do today. The Jews they have a civil calendar, a ceremonial calendar.
What about the fact that Jesus ate Passover meal with the other and the other 3?
You're going to a new topic. Let's finish this. Was it
go ahead.
6th hour or the 9th hour? Question: at 9 o'clock in the morning, that's the 9th hour of our day, because we start our day at midnight. But it's only the 3rd hour of the daylight if you want to assume sunrise at 6 o'clock.
It says 3rd and 6th, though.
Okay. Point would be, it depends on where you want to start your clock. I think the Roman timekeeping was different than the Hebrew timekeeping.
If you don't think that having that like that, well, if John wrote John, okay, and Mark, who was supposedly taking his from Peter, from what I understand, Mark is a second-hand gospel, not somebody who was a witness. you would think that both of them would give the.
Well, let me ask you this, Nolan. If it could be proven to you that there is a difference in Mark is using the Roman clock and John is using the Hebrew clock, and therefore there isn't a contradiction, would you then go on and look for another contradiction, or would you say,
I don't have to look for any more. There's some that I don't think there's any way to.
Okay, so I guess my basic question, obviously you can see it coming. Do you want answers to these, or do you want to not get answers?
I wanted answers to these. I looked on the internet for the answers to contradictions all the time when I got cable modem, and I was big into that. But then after a while, I started getting hit with so many to where, like, just the fact that in Matthew and Luke, it says that Joseph's father is somebody totally different. Joseph's father. It does not say Mary. Luke says Heli, and the other one says Jacob, I believe. Those are different fathers. And then all the people are different.
They're different for 14 generations, clear back to King David.
And there's only 13 generations in Matthew, even though it says 14. Read it. If you count it, there's only 13.
Interesting. You keep going to new contradictions.
But go ahead. I'm just saying, go ahead and say why you think that.
Well, if you read the Luke genealogy of Jesus, Luke chapter 3, it says which was the son of, which was the son of. So you have to kind of you have to reverse it back to match the Matthew, which was begat, begat, begat. But if Matthew goes from King David to Solomon the king, and then goes on down, and whereas the Luke generation, Luke goes from David to Nathan, who was the high priest, who was the priest anyway, who came and confronted his own dad when he sinned against Bathsheba. But so Jesus had the right, it combined again with Joseph and Mary, where Jesus had the right to be the king and the priest of Israel.
It doesn't say Mary, though. If you take it clearly what it says, Joseph.
Right. In the Hebrew way of thinking, though, is an adopted father is a father, just like Moses was raised in Pharaoh's courts.
But neither one say Mary's father was. It says Joseph.
Well, again, I would like to ask, if you got an answer to this, would you just go look for another one, or do you really want an answer? Are you running from something, Nolan? I guess.
No, I'm not running from anything.
Okay, I'm good. Well, if you will send me to my phone, you have my phone number, you call all the time. Send me an address that you'd like me to. Have you read the book by Peter Ruckman, The Errors in the King James Bible, where he answers all of these?
He doesn't answer all of these. I know that.
Okay.
But I've read some of these. I don't have the book, though, if that's what you're saying.
The book is $25. I will send it to you for free. I'll pay the postage. Okay. You give me an address to send. If you don't give me, I'm not going to harm anybody.
We'll do that after we're off the air.
I'll send you Peter Ruckman's book, and you can read it for yourself. All these have been answered for centuries.
Okay.
Skeptics keep bringing them up because they don't want to believe.
Really?
And it's been an hour and 10 minutes. We only got a few more.
They got hit. How about James 1:13? God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But in Genesis 22:1, and it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham. So neither he tempteth any man, God did tempt Abraham.
I guess that's a definition of the word tempt. If I tempt my children with a candy hair, get in the car, is that tempting somebody to do evil or tempting someone to do good? I don't know. I remember reading that. This is not what I focus on in my ministry. My focus is on creation, evolution.
Because this would help.
There are 31,000 verses in this book. Okay, I've read them all many times, but no, I don't focus on the supposed contradictions that you skeptics keep thinking up. I've covered quite a few. Well, I've covered quite a few of them, but my focus is on creation, the flood, the evidence for that, as opposed to end times,
which you said you changed to post-trib, right?
Post-trib. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you said it took 40 years, but you finally did it, right? Because you decided that it was too much. But you read the Bible many times during those 40 years, right?
And didn't catch it, and I'm embarrassed about it.
It's because it's written 3 times in the Gospels after the tribulation, right?
I know.
So is there a chance that you've had an answer to something else, like maybe evolution or on old Earth, but you just haven't caught that you had the answer yet? Over the last some odd years, you just haven't. Is there a chance?
I believed in evolution. I believed the Earth was billions of years old. I believed that for a long time, even after I became a Christian.
But I thought you said.
I don't remember when I finally.
You said at 16, you said that you started reading the Bible and you realized that there was that one of them had to be wrong. So how much longer
And
could you possibly believe both?
Well, so what happened was I fell into the trap of believing in the gap theory for 10 years.
But not evolution.
Well, I believe that the Earth might be billions of years or millions of years old by putting it in a gap between verse Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, the gap theory taught in the Schofield Bible and other places. It's not true. So it took me, I would be guessing, it took me 10 or 12, 15 years to get over all that. And I began to read books by people like Henry Morris, Dwayne Gish, and those guys. And I said, whoa, this makes sense. And especially when it took a while, so I had to change. Is there a chance that you will change and get back to believing the Bible is true and come join me?
There is a chance.
Good. Okay, you
I
come
would
join
say,
our
but
crew.
but you do know that all those young Earth proofs have been answered, and you don't accept some of those.
But hold it. I taught school for 15 years. People always gave answers on the test.
Well, then I could say the same thing about those contradictions.
Correct.
Give an answer.
But they didn't. It doesn't mean they have the right answer just because they answered.
Same thing with the contradictions.
Right. Atheists somehow think we answered that. Well, that doesn't mean you gave a logical or the right answer. I had to mark many questions wrong and mark the grade down accordingly because they gave an answer, but it wasn't right. So don't say these young Earth evidences have been answered. That doesn't mean they've been answered correctly.
I listened to that
logically
with the shrinking sun thing, or how much it's gone. Like, because it's actually 4 million tons. It loses a second because it converts 400 million tons of hydrogen to helium, but it loses 4 million per second. But if you
it loses 4 million tons per second from the mass of the sun, loses it to space, right?
Yeah,
so the sun is losing weight. 4 million. The text I read said 5 million, but the sun is losing
5 million.
Okay,
the
sun is losing 4 million. 4 million tons a second.
Yes, yes, you can do the whole number. If you do 5 million times how many seconds are in a year, and then times 4.6 billion, you're not going to get a number even close to how big the sun is. It's not even but like 1% of the whole sun's weight. Not even.
I'll do the math on that. Hold it. You're assuming now a linear progression as opposed to logarithmic or geometric progression.
Why would it be so much? If it was that much more in the past, it would have cooked everything and there wouldn't be planet.
Well, that's my point. The shrinking sun and the sun losing this mass. See, the mass
loss of the sun. Mass. It weighs.
If 4 million tons a second gets to be quite a bit when you consider Earth depends upon that the mass. It's a factor in the gravitational pull to keep the distance to the Earth the same.
It's only been less than a percentage. Okay.
Because I don't know that I believe that, but I'll do the math on that. Okay.
It weighs 1.9 to 10 to the 30th kilogram. And the number that you take off of it would be to the 25th or something like that, which is less than a percent. Like even if the sun goes on for another 4 million years or whatever, 4 billion years, it will only lose like 0.36% of its weight.
Give me that. What does the sun weigh right now? Of course, it technically weighs
1.9. Well, this is its mass. 1.988 times 10 to the 30 kilograms. Or
let me ask you.
Or 2 octillion metric tons.
Oh yeah, I can count real high numbers. But let me ask you a question. Do you think this sun with 1.9 times 10 to the 30th kilograms was all squeezed into a dot smaller than a period on a page?
We'll talk about that next time.
But you believe that story, don't you?
We will talk about that next time.
Okay. I know you believe it. That's okay. All right. Well, good.
How about this? In the Noah story, you said that you believe that the plants, some of them, they die, or did they die, or was everything killed on Earth when he was in the?
Well, it says very clearly in the story in Genesis 6, 7, and 8, if you read it, that everything in whose nostrils was the breath of life perished. Plants don't have nostrils, nor do they have the breath of life.
Okay.
Are plants alive is a question we could argue about. In the biblical sense, I don't think so. They're not considered alive. In our modern scientific classification, we've decided plants are in the living category. But there's something different about plants and animals. I think everybody would agree with that. Something different, intrinsically different.
It also says, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground.
So you're thinking that includes plants?
Living substance? That
No,
sounds totally different than living animal. Would you say that if you were saying?
Good point. I think plants, yes, we see it all the time now. Some plants survive a flood just fine.
But how would they survive over a year underneath water?
Why do you think they're underwater for a year?
That's what it says.
No, it doesn't. It says Noah was in the ark for a year, but
And
he
the
landed.
flood was a year.
Well, no, Noah was in the ark for a year.
And the flood was a year.
No, he was in the ark for 7 days before the flood even started.
And it was over a month. It was like a year and a month long, or 400 days or something.
No, Nolan, he was in the ark for a year and a month. That does
okay.
not.
So okay, my bad. Then let's say it was 270 days.
No, he hit bottom. The ark landed, hit bottom, stopped moving in the 7th month. But it took 5 more months for the water to go down.
Yes.
Parts of the earth might have only been covered up for a few weeks.
How?
You don't know.
How would they've only been covered for a few weeks?
If the crust of the earth is broken up like an eggshell, like obviously it is, there are fault lines all over the place. If the crust of the earth was broken up during Noah's flood, which I think it was, the fountains of the deep broke open, water under the crust shot up, broke the earth up like an eggshell, and those plates are still flexing up and down today. The Himalaya, Mount Everest is, 15 feet taller now than it was when they first measured it, or something like that. It's still growing. The Himalayan plate is lifting. Who cares? Okay. Some plates are sinking down. So I think the crust of the earth is still flexing up and down, but during Noah's flood, it would have been more radical. So I don't think you could prove plants had to survive a year, because you're confusing. Noah's in the ark for a year. Some part of Alabama was only underground for 3 weeks and 2 days.
All right. So
and I completely made up that number. But
yeah, okay. For instance, let's okay. It says that the mountains and the high hills were covered, right?
Correct.
So there had to be mountains before the flood. Mountains are thousands of feet tall. Okay?
Well, who's defining mountain?
Absolutely. Look up a definition of a mountain.
Oh, and you want me to take a modern dictionary? Look up a modern person.
So you're saying that, okay, so a mountain was only 300 feet tall? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say that. I'm just saying you're wanting to put some modern classification.
And it says it landed on the mountains of Ararat, which means they had to have known about those beforehand, or did the person write and name them that later and then wrote that?
Well, the ark could have landed in the mountain range that later they called the mountains of Ararat, because the flood is back here, and Moses wrote the story 1,000 years later. He might have said, just like I would say, the Indians used to live in Conecuh County, Alabama. But there was no Conecuh County, Alabama when they lived there.
But that isn't what you'd say. What you would say, what is now Conecuh County. That's how you say it.
Correct. There was no Alabama when they lived here.
Let's say it was only 1,000 feet deep. Okay? And let's say that was enough to flood everything. How could something not be flooded a month later? Because water seeks its own level.
I agree.
You know how much flexing and dropping down would have to happen for that? That would be such a large number. I mean, an earthquake, if it's 10 feet, if something drops 10 feet, that's that's catastrophic.
Chaos.
So 1,000 feet or something, it would have to be more than that, because it would have to be enough to dump enough water to where that water is gone, and then to where something would only be flooded for a second. But you also said that there would be tidal waves like 200 feet tall or something over and over. So it would keep getting hit with things over and over and over. Do you think this is conducive to growing plants?
Well, I think people, that's why people died if they weren't on that ark. Everything outside died, animals and plants. Most of the plants. Now, plants can survive either through floating in log mats. I mean, this happens all the time. And there are floods in like the Amazon Valley or in the Congo River Valley where it'll flood for months. Huge trees, they just float around. And then when the water goes down, they reroot.
So what about the olive branch that was found
You keep changing stories.
No, but that's we're talking about plants. If a plant survived,
sure,
there was no plant to be found the first time. 7 days later, Dove comes back with an olive branch.
I know. See, there was an olive tree that was growing in that region that was only underwater for a couple of weeks, and the rest of it was fine. And so the dove found that one.
Ah, okay. And then gotcha.
No, you don't got me. Now listen, let me explain to you. The oceans today, you can Google it, average 12,000 feet deep.
Yes.
That's the average depth of the oceans. 70% of this planet right now is underwater.
Absolutely.
Okay. 30% is above water. We call it landmass. Okay. Um, the average height of all the land masses in the world is 2,500 feet, I believe, or 2,300, around 2,000 feet. So if the continents average 2,000 feet high and the oceans average 12,000 feet deep, 6 times more, 5 times more than the average height of the continent, all you got to do is adjust the crust of the Earth. A 1 mile change spread out over 1,000 miles is 0.1%.
But it would have to be across the whole thing for the
Sure,
not to be flooded, and that would
if you smooth,
that wouldn't have killed everything.
if you smooth out the Earth right now, just smooth it all out, it's 8,000 feet of water everywhere,
But
completely covered. That's almost
don't you think there was more land mass before the flood?
Yeah, the water was in the crust of the Earth. It says in Genesis 1, the water was
in the. Do you think it was more land or more ocean before the flood?
Much more land. I'm just wildly guessing. 90% land before the flood.
Then why are 95% of all fossils we find marine?
Well, because everything was able to multiply rapidly. The oceans were filled with creatures. Today, marine life
but billions, crinoids and all that?
Nolan, marine life only fills a small part of the ocean. There are huge sections of the ocean with almost nothing living there. They call them deserts.
But if it was small, if it was such a small amount and it wasn't so deep, okay, that they couldn't have lived, there wouldn't have been enough food for everything.
Well, then maybe my 90%, 10% is wrong. It should be more like 85, 15. I don't know what it was before the flood, but the oceans were big enough to have all the animals that we're currently finding as fossils. How's that?
But then why wouldn't there be more fossils found of the animals, the vertebrates and all that?
Well, animals, creatures that are capable of escaping a flood to run to high ground for even a short time are more likely to end up on top of the sediments rather than in the sediments.
But they got buried, right? I thought everything was buried a mile deep.
No, some were buried mile deep, and we do find lots of fossils. The Karoo Formation has 800 million of them, vertebrate fossils.
And they all lived on Earth before.
Yeah, all at the same time.
Just there?
The fruiting capacity of the planet was incredible. That original creation could supply a lot more animals per square mile than we can today. So any farmer will tell you, good farmland in some areas can hold 20 cows per acre. Other areas in South Dakota takes 20 acres per cow.
Do animals we consider prey or herbivores today have defense mechanisms against carnivores or the predators?
I think they had they use them today for defense mechanisms, but like horns on a cow, those are great for clearing grass off or moving. They use horns for all sorts of things. Besides,
what about the insect that looks like a leaf, though? Why would it?
Well, I think also the horns, probably the mama cow thinks that looks cool. So she's.
But why the insect that looks like a leaf, or the one that looks like a stick, or the camouflage ones? That seems like they're trying to hide from predators.
It seems amazing to me that anybody can believe that came from a rock.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm asking if everything were vegetarian, why would something need to? You're telling me that since the flood, an insect was able to make a leaf, and
I think you got a couple of false assumptions here. You're assuming that insects are included in the animal kingdom.
It says that they ate plants, not so. Insects would be
insects, but if insects, same thing with fish. They might have eaten other fish because the command was given for those whose nostrils on land. So I don't know that insects would be classified
by birds and by other things.
Yeah. What if insects were classified as a complex, self-replicating food source?
That's not the definition of an insect. An insect is an animal.
No, that's the Hovind definition.
Well, it's wrong.
Insects are insects.
I could give definitions for anything then, and if we're going to just go by that and then win every argument.
Right. So the insects were created to be a food source. And so, they needed camouflage to hide from other predators. Even though, don't some plants have defense mechanisms, or don't some plants? They're plants. They're designed to be eaten. Anyway,
and that's why they have them. And then what about
our time is up. You asked me to present a creation view, and you said you would refute it.
Yes.
Have you refuted what I taught, that they used to live to be 900, there was a flood, and the earth is 6,000 years old?
Yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
One more, if I can.
Sure.
When it has to do with dating, and that's it.
Sure.
Okay. Let me get to the thing I have on it. Okay, you talk about radiometric dating and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you know about amino acid dating?
I have read some on that. Yeah, I think that's dating of anything is obviously based on some assumptions that we know that this rate has been consistent. We know that there's all kinds of things that affect the rate of decay of all sorts of these things.
But not of radiometric stuff.
Yeah.
You can't change the rate.
They're calling me. Time's up here. Bring that up for the next one. But if you want to schedule another debate or discussion.
Yeah, we will. And I'll have to explain all the dating, because there's about 30 different types of datings that they do, and they cross-check them.
Yeah, blind dating.
Yeah, that too. Of course, yeah. Double dating.
Double dating.
that dating where it's like speed dating. You know, every minute, 5 minutes with them, and you.
That's good.
Okay. Do you want to give? You don't want to give a final say, like a?
Sure. I want people to, if they want to get a hold of our ministry, drdino.com, DRDINO.com. My name is Kent Hovind, and our website, Dr. Dino, our YouTube is Kent Hovind Official. You can get all of our stuff and social media contact from the website, Dr. Dino, or you can call 855-BIG-DINO, like a big dinosaur, 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3. I take calls all day long, probably missed 40 of them in the last hour. So thank you, Nolan. You rescued me from my phone. Thank you so much. Yeah. I take a bunch from you all the time too, by the way.
Yes, you do.
And I think I'm always kind and
yes,
considerate. They are not always kind and considerate to me. So that's your.
And can I give a let's
sure. You give a quick closing and tell people where to get a hold of you if you want.
Well, nobody needs to get a hold of me. I will. I'm not after any type of fame or any type of getting to. This is a subject that fascinates me. I just want to say in closing, all I wanted to say is that most of the people that believe or accept evolution in the United States are Christians. And most of the people that accept an old earth are Christians. And to classify them as having a different religion, I think, is absurd than theirs. And also saying that evolution is not a science is also absurd. Who decides what a science is? Scientists decide, not somebody. And that's like, and people thinking, and also with the Bible calls whale a fish, it calls a bat a bird, it's all these different things. And you can say, oh, if it swims in the water, it's a fish, but why doesn't mean that's just changing definitions. That'd be like saying if the Bible called Jesus a female, and then you say, well, in the biblical sense, Jesus was a female. It's like, no, that word has a definition. And just like a fish has a definition, and a mammal has a definition, and whale the definitions of that. But beside that, I believe that if there are contradictions in the Bible, that doesn't mean that the Bible has to be wrong or that you should stop believing in it. I just believe that holding rigid to a certain form of it that we have translated 1,600 years after it was written, it would be not advisable. But anyway, I would like to thank Kent for having this discussion with me, because we talked about it, and he actually agreed to do one creation, and I think he did a good job of defending his beliefs. And then I will do the same on evolution and the old Earth the next time he is okay with doing that with me.
Okay.
And we are just under 90 minutes there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nolan. Let's do it again. Thank you.
Yeah,
all right.
Of course. Thank you. Later.
Okay.